The pain was a knife blade turning slowly beneath her apron strings, and Jansbeth knew with cold, absolute clarity that if she showed weakness, she would lose the only sanctuary she had left. St. Andrew Hall, early winter, 1811. She was trying to count the tiles on the vast, ornate floor of the upstairs corridor, anything to keep her mind from the fierce, tight knot coiling in her lower right side. She had been hired a week ago as a scullery maid, the lowest of the low, and even that Grace felt fragile. She needed this job desperately. Losing it meant being vulnerable to the world that had already stripped her bare. "I cannot afford to be weak," she recited, the mantra tasting like copper on her tongue. "Weakness gets you noticed. Noticed gets you thrown out. Jansbeth, stop dawdling." Mrs. Denton, the Duke's ancient hawk-eyed housekeeper, materialized, smelling faintly of lavender and judgment. "His Grace, Theophilus St. Andrew, requires the main floor and upper suites prepared immediately for his return from London tonight. Mr. Gibbs is indisposed. Check all the suites for me. The entire place must be spotless when His Grace gets back. You will start upstairs and do not tarry." The pain spiking in her abdomen blurred the instructions. All Jansbeth heard was the urgency and the expectation that she cover vast, unknown territory. A chill of immediate, paralyzing dread seized her. She knew what people whispered about the War Duke. He was a storm made solid, a man who tolerated no softness. Jansbeth forced her feet up the grand staircase. The effort sent a spike of white-hot agony through her abdomen. Every step was a conscious betrayal of her body. She knew she was feverish. This was terror, but it was physical, not just emotional. Just get through the cleaning. Just survive the day. The pain was a desperate editor, censoring her thoughts, demanding immediate attention. Jansbeth had never been above the second floor. She stumbled into the first suite she found that seemed incomplete, a massive, opulent chamber. Because she was only scanning, and due to her fever, she made the catastrophic mistake of assuming it belonged to some important visiting baron or a distant relative. She certainly didn't know the room belonged to Theophilus St. Andrew, the Duke of St. Andrew, and was his inner sanctum. The room itself was imposing, dark wood, heavy crimson drapes, and a silence that felt heavier than the London fog. The air smelled of old leather, ink, and something sharp and metallic, the ghost of a life lived far away from domestic service. She forced herself to work, running a dust cloth over the massive mahogany desk, her breathing shallow. But as she smoothed the duvet on the enormous four-poster bed, a dark, imposing structure that looked more like a tomb than a place of rest, the pain intensified, doubling her over. A desperate, animal thought surfaced. "Just 1 minute. I will just rest for 1 minute. Let the fever pass." The pain overcame her. She collapsed fully onto the foot of the bed, her small body swallowed by the depth of the mattress. She curled into a tight ball, her cheek pressed against the cold, crisp linen of the duvet, seeking the single moment of relief. The world spun. The darkness of the room seemed to absorb her. She was so tired. The pain would not stop, but the fatigue was stronger. She fell asleep on his bed, unaware that it belonged to the most terrifying man in the county. Theophilus St. Andrew, Duke of St. Andrew, had been gone less than 48 hours, but London society had exhausted the last ounce of patience he possessed. At 37, he carried the weight of a decade of military command, not just in his broad shoulders, but in the permanent lines etched around his striking light blue eyes. His impeccable auburn hair was styled with a deep side part, and his smooth jawline was set hard, anticipating the next inevitable battle, a battle for silence and solitude. He moved through the house with a soldier's silent efficiency. No announcements, no fanfare. He paused at the threshold of his private chambers. The air inside was disturbed. He saw her instantly. A tiny, insignificant figure in a cheap grey maid's uniform crumpled on the foot of his bed. His first emotion was not rage, but a chilling, analytical curiosity. Trespass. A profound violation of his space. He should call the steward, dismiss her instantly, perhaps have her arrested. He watched her face. Her features were sharp, flushed with an unnatural heat. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. This was not sloth. This was not insolence. This was fear made flesh. He took a slow step into the room, his boots making no sound on the thick Axminster carpet. Jansbeth woke with a terrified gasp. The image of his towering, silent figure, dark coat, sharp features, the stuff of instant nightmares. She scrambled backward off the bed, but her legs instantly buckled. The moment she saw the Duke standing there, she knew the terrible truth of where she was. A wave of paralyzing, blinding agony ripped through her. She cried out, a small, involuntary whimper, and threw her weight onto the nearest solid object, the edge of the massive mahogany chest of drawers. She clutched the dark wood, knuckles white, fighting the urge to vomit. Before she could process the thought of apology or dismissal, before he could bark an order, Theophilus was moving. Not with anger, but with an instinct honed on battlefields to steady a wounded comrade. He reached out, his large, warm hand clamping around her trembling arm, supporting her weight. His touch, usually ice-cold and aloof, felt alarmingly steady against her fevered skin. He leaned in, his clean-shaven, sharp features inches from hers. His light blue eyes searched her face, not for lies, but for the source of the agony that was making her tremble like a leaf. His deep voice, stripped of all ducal pretense, cut through her panic and pain. "Tell me the truth, Maid. Did I hurt you?" Theophilus's question, "Did I hurt you?" was the demand of a commander for immediate intelligence, stripped bare of all the ducal arrogance he usually employed. The agonizing truth was, no, he had not hurt her. Life and the desperate requirements of a hidden existence had. Jansbeth, clinging to the mahogany chest, could only manage a pathetic, feverish tremor of her head. Her internal world was screaming at her with raw terror, but her body was betraying her with a violence she couldn't control. If I tell him the truth, he'll dismiss me. Dukes don't deal with diseased staff. They deal with order, and I am the ultimate disorder. He knelt, his light blue eyes focusing with military intensity on her white-knuckled grip. "This is not faintness, Maid," he stated. "This is crisis. Tell me where the pain is." Jansbeth pointed vaguely to her side, a low guttural whimper escaping her throat despite her best efforts to swallow it. He realized a life was dissolving before him. He despised inefficiency and disorder, and a death in his forbidden chambers would create a profound, intolerable breach of his carefully maintained equilibrium. He pulled his large, dark military cloak from the chair. The garment, smelling of old leather and discipline, was heavy, stifling, and utterly incongruous against her thin grey uniform. He commanded her, "You are under my roof, and you are not leaving this house until a physician has seen you." Theophilus shattered all ducal protocol. He gathered the feverish Maid in his arms. Her weight was impossibly light, a terrifying fragility that spoke of long hardship, yet her body was rigid with the tension of agony. He carried her, ignoring the gaping footman, toward the green suite. His focus was only on stabilization. He summoned Mr. Gibbs, his steward, with a raw command that shook the walls. "Send a rider to the township. Mr. Abernathy, the surgeon, lives 2 hours from here. Tell the rider to ride as if the hounds of hell are at his heels. He must see if by chance the surgeon is at home. If he is not—" Theophilus paused, his jaw tightening. "If he is not, then we must pray she has the strength to survive the journey to a physician in town. Go, now." Mrs. Denton arrived, quivering with indignation and fear of scandal. Theophilus dismissed her with a single, icy stare. "I demand order. The scandal is yours if you allow your staff to gossip. Now, attend to her needs or step aside." The hours that followed were a silent, agonizing vigil. The rider had gone, leaving the outcome entirely to fate. Theophilus dismissed the staff and stood alone in the corner of the guest suite, watching the small, fevered figure on the vast bed. She was not resting peacefully. The pain was a living thing in the room. Her legs kicked out involuntarily beneath the heavy duvet, and her lips curled back in a rictus of silent screaming. Her brow was furrowed so deeply it looked like a bruise. As Theophilus watched, the ornate room seemed to dissolve. The silence of the house clashed violently with the visual noise of her suffering. It was a feeling of déjà vu that hit him like a physical blow. He felt like an invisible spectator, a ghost in his own home. Suddenly, he wasn't in St. Andrew Hall. He was back in the peninsula, the morning after a mortar shell had decimated his forward command. He remembered the stillness of the air, the ringing in his ears, and the sight of his lieutenant lying on the ground, his body twisting in this exact same rhythm of agony, while Theophilus stood frozen, unable to command the pain to stop. He hated this helplessness. He wished he could reach inside her and crush the source of the pain with his bare hands. He walked closer to the bed, drawn by a force he couldn't name. He needed to overwrite the war memory. He looked down at her face, which was glistening with cold sweat. As she twisted, a lock of hair fell away from her forehead, revealing the curve of her temple and the wide, terrified shape of her eyes as they fluttered open, unseeing. The war memory shattered, replaced instantly by something softer, something haunting. It was a sunlit afternoon, years ago, just before he was deployed. He was entering a smoky London bakery when a little girl, no older than 12, with wide, trusting eyes and a ribbon in her hair, had stopped him. She had silently reached up, pushing a bright red lollipop into his hand before skipping away. It was the purest, most unexpected kindness anyone had ever shown the disciplined soldier. He stared at the maid. The resemblance was striking, a ghost of that same innocence trapped in a mask of pain. Could it be, he thought, his heart hammering a strange rhythm? No, it is impossible. That child belonged to a life of sunlight. This woman belongs to the shadows of scullery work. And yet the memory refused to fade. It felt like a sign he couldn't quite grasp, a whisper that perhaps the universe was not as chaotic as he feared. He felt a profound, aching sorrow for her, a desire to protect not just the body, but the memory of the innocence she might have once held. "Please," she whimpered, her voice cracking, her hand clutching the sheets until her knuckles turned white. Theophilus reached out, almost involuntarily, to brush the damp hair from her forehead. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice rough. "The surgeon is coming." The sound of shattering hooves on the cobblestones outside snapped the trance. The door burst open moments later. Mr. Abernathy, the surgeon, stumbled in, mud-splattered and breathless from the punishing ride, his bag of instruments clutched in his hand. "Your Grace," Abernathy gasped. "I was at my gate when your rider arrived. I came at once. Where is she?" Theophilus stepped back, the intense, sorrowful focus in his eyes immediately retreating behind a mask of ducal severity. He had been caught, deeply and irrevocably, in a moment of weakness. Mr. Abernathy delivered the diagnosis quickly. Severe internal inflammation, fever of the bowels, likely leading to peritonitis. The poison is spreading. She is in extremis. Theophilus paced the room. He knew the cost, the risk, the monumental scandal. But the sudden, absolute depth of his connection to her, anchored in that haunting, sweet memory, demanded he act. "Then you will prepare for the surgery, Abernathy. Now, I will pay for everything. If she dies, the fault is mine. If she lives, she is under my protection." Theophilus watched the preparation. As the laudanum finally eased her agony, freeing her mind for one last, unburdened thought, she spoke a forgotten truth. "Juliana, forgive me." Theophilus's head snapped up. Juliana. Not the name she was hired under. He had saved her body, committed his name to her welfare, and she had repaid him with a secret. He stood there, watching the surgeon cut into the maid, the air in the room heavy with the metallic scent of blood. Logic told him she might not survive the night, but as he looked at her face, twisted in pain, yet bearing that haunting, impossible resemblance to the child who had once handed him hope, A strange, fierce resolve settled over his terror. He knew with the absolute conviction of a man facing his destiny that he could not let this light go out. Whether she was the girl from his memory or a stranger carrying her ghost, he would wrestle death itself to keep her alive long enough to find the truth. St. Andrew Hall, early winter, 1811. The first weak grey light of dawn crept across the frozen grounds of St. Andrew Hall, finding Theophilus St. Andrew still standing sentinel in the corner of the green suite. The surgeon, Mr. Abernathy, had collapsed into a chair in the adjoining room hours ago, his grim work finished, but the Duke had not moved. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of blood, the sweet, cloying smell of laudanum, and the terrifying silence of a life hanging in the balance. Theophilus watched the rise and fall of the maid's chest. It was a shallow, ragged rhythm, but it was there. Every breath she took felt like a theft from death, a victory he had purchased with his reputation. He stepped closer, drawn by a pull he could not explain. It wasn't duty. It wasn't pity. It was something magnetic, a hum in the air whenever he looked at her fevered, delicate features. He searched her face for the ghost of the bakery girl, but the pain twisted her expression, masking the truth. He reached out, unable to stop himself. His knuckles brushed her cheek. He expected only heat and illness, but the jolt that shot through him was something else entirely. It wasn't the texture of a child. It was the softness of a woman. The shock of it, of touching a woman when he had been searching for a memory, sent him stepping back as if scorched. He was looking for a ghost, but he had touched a woman, and the confusion paralyzed him. Why do I feel this? Why does this stranger pull at the tether of my life? The days that followed blurred into one long vigil. Time was no longer counted by hours, but by the fragile victories of her survival. Theophilus fought a quiet war against Mrs. Denton to keep the maid in the guest wing. He gave the staff a practical explanation. That infection must be contained. But the truth was darker and more irrational. He could not bear the thought of sending her back below stairs until he understood why she tethered him. He felt a fierce, unexplainable need to be the only guardian of her pain. Winter thickened against the window panes, frosting every view into white quiet. Inside, the world narrowed to the small, lamplit circle surrounding the bed. He was there the moment she first sat up, her hand trembling as she reached for water. He steadied the glass, his fingers brushing hers, an electric, forbidden touch that neither acknowledged. He was there the day the color returned to her cheeks, a faint flush of life that made his own breath catch. He remained distant but constant, silent but watchful, a man waiting for a sign from the universe he no longer trusted. 2 months passed. The winter sky brightened into a sharper blue. Theophilus moved Juliana to the library to complete her recovery, assigning her gentle tasks, sorting correspondence, cataloguing letters, anything that kept her safe and close without overexerting her. One afternoon, he entered the library. The silence inside was familiar, a cold cathedral of dust motes and leather. But today, something felt different. Juliana stood near the south window, reaching up to place a book on a high shelf. Her simple grey dress hung loosely on her recovering frame, but there was a grace to her movement that caught his eye. At that moment, a beam of winter sun pierced the high window, striking her hair and igniting it into copper fire. Theophilus froze. The angle of her head, the light turning her hair into molten gold. It was not a memory. It was a mirror. The baker's child. The little girl skipping away from him in a London street 10 years ago, sunlight catching her hair exactly the same way. He walked toward her, his steps soundless on the Persian rug. "Years ago," he said, his voice low and rough, "I met a child in London. A girl with hair exactly like yours." Juliana turned, clutching a ledger to her chest. His expression, the raw, desperate hope, terrified her. "Your Grace." He stopped a few feet from her. She gave me a sweet, a lollipop. It was the only kindness I carried into the war. She wore a silver hair clip shaped like a swallow in flight, with a single pearl. It caught the sun just as your hair does now. Silence filled the library. Dust motes hung like suspended stars around them. Juliana's breath stuttered. Her hand drifted to her throat. She knew that clip. She knew that day. It was the last day she had been innocent, before her father's debts swallowed everything. "I remember," Theophilus whispered, stepping closer, "that she had two. Twin swallows. I watched one slide from her hair as she ran. I always wondered if she noticed." Her hands shook. Without speaking, she crossed to a small, battered valise in the corner. She reached into the lining of her only spare dress and returned with something in her trembling palm. The tarnished silver swallow, dull pearl still intact. Theophilus stared at it. The confirmation struck him like a physical blow. It was her, the one bright memory the world had not managed to take from him. "It is you," he breathed. "You are the girl from the bakery." Tears welled in Juliana's eyes. "I was that girl, Your Grace. But I am not her anymore. That girl had a name. That girl was Juliana." She swallowed, her voice cracking. "Jansbeth does not exist. I invented her to survive, because if you knew the danger I bring, if you knew why I'm hiding, you would wish you had never remembered the girl with the silver swallows." Theophilus looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a maid, not a memory, but a woman holding both his past and his future. "Try me," he said, his voice a dark vow. "Tell me the danger, and watch me destroy it." Winter drifted slowly across St. Andrew Hall, softening the sharp edges of the estate and filling the quiet corridors with a kind of hushed expectancy. 3 months passed this way, quiet, steady, almost dreamlike, and though life resumed its ordinary rhythm around her, Juliana felt as if she lived inside a separate world, a smaller world, a gentler one, a world shaped, somehow, by the man who had saved her. Her health returned in careful stages. First, the ability to sit without pain, then to walk without gripping the walls, then to work with her hands again, light tasks only, sorting letters, tidying the library shelves, anything that allowed her to remain in the warm parts of the house. The staff accepted her quiet presence. Mrs. Denton tolerated her, but with pursed lips. Theophilus Street. Andrew, however, he was impossible to understand. He greeted her each morning with a single nod. Nothing more. Polite, brief, distant. Yet he always noticed if she looked tired. He made certain her work was never heavy. If she reached too high for a book, he would appear, silently, to take it down for her. If she faltered, even slightly, his hand would steady her elbow before she had a chance to fall. But he never lingered, never allowed the air between them to become anything but proper. He was kind, but he was unreachable. And the strange truth was, she was grateful for that. Too grateful. It frightened her sometimes. One afternoon, she found herself alone in her chamber, sitting before the small mirror above the washstand. The light was soft, the kind that made the world seem gentle, but she hardly recognized the face looking back at her. Was she pretty? She had never bothered to wonder before. Survival left no room for vanity, but now she wondered constantly. She touched her cheek, studying the curve of it. Her face still looked thin from illness. Her collarbones showed too sharply. Her hair, though long, seemed plain beside the rich brunettes and honey blondes she had seen in London's elegant streets. And her figure. She flushed at her own reflection. She had no real shape compared to the women Theophilus must have known. No soft curves, no impressive beauty, nothing striking. Why would a man like him look at someone like me? She pushed the thought away, embarrassed even in the privacy of her own room. The Duke was handsome, exceptionally so. Composed, disciplined, self-contained. His voice alone seemed crafted to command a room. He carried the air of a man carved by storms, one who understood danger but lived above it. Women must have adored him. Women with grace and jewels and gowns she could never imagine wearing. And yet, he had no wife. She tried to picture him married, walking beside some refined beauty, and her stomach tightened with something she refused to name. Why isn't he married? She wondered for the 100th time. He is good, he is fair, he could choose anyone. But he never spoke of romance, never hinted at having been in love. And when she tried to imagine asking him about it, she recoiled. How foolish she would sound, how ungrateful. He had saved her life. Why would she trouble him with questions about his own? She pressed a hand to her chest, suddenly aware of how fast her heart beat whenever he entered a room. I must behave myself, she whispered internally. He saved my life. That is all. I owe him respect. Gratitude. Nothing more. But gratitude was not what kept her awake at night. Sometimes she heard him walking the corridors long after the staff retired. She recognized his steps now. Steady, deliberate, solitary. She wondered what occupied his thoughts, whether he ever thought of her at all, whether her presence in his home was a burden or a comfort. The days continued like this. Quiet, careful closeness with a man who never once crossed a line. When the thaw of early spring softened the frost on the windows, Theophilus sought her out in the library. He stood in the doorway as she sorted a stack of correspondence. Miss Juliana, he said, his tone even, a matter has arisen. She set down the letters. Your Grace? It is no longer safe for you here, he said simply. Your family will not stop searching. We leave for France within the week. France? Her breath caught. He continued, unaware of the storm building inside her. My uncle's estate remains empty for the season. It is quiet enough to keep you hidden. You will travel as my distant cousin. It is the safest arrangement. Juliana nodded slowly, her voice soft. If that is your wish, Your Grace. His eyes held hers for a brief moment, so brief she might have imagined it. Then he looked away, already turning toward the corridor. We leave on Friday, he said, dismissing himself. That night, Juliana lay awake, unable to calm her racing thoughts. He is taking me across the sea. To keep me safe, he could have left me to my fate. But he didn't. Her heart swelled painfully. I must not let this mean more than it does, she whispered into the darkness. But the truth was unmistakable now. She was falling in love with the Duke of St. Andrew. Quietly, hopelessly, alone. And he did not see her at all. The journey to France felt unreal to Juliana, as though her life had slipped into another person's story. Theophilus arranged everything, the carriage, the documents, the crossing, the modest but well-kept countryside estate waiting just an hour outside Paris. It was large enough to shelter them, small enough to be overlooked, a place built for quiet. The house was peaceful, stone walls covered in early spring ivy, a long gravel drive, a soft wind carrying the smell of the river nearby. It should have calmed her, but her heart had not learned calm. A week passed in a gentle rhythm. Morning sun across the small garden, light duties within the estate, far easier than the library work at St. Andrew Hall. Theophilus handled his correspondence in the study, spoke to her only when necessary, and maintained the same careful distance he always had. She told herself she should be grateful for that, and yet, day by day, her feelings deepened into something that frightened her, something she could not speak of, something that lived in every quiet moment between breaths. One evening, just after dusk, Juliana found herself wandering the dim corridor toward the drawing room. The estate was unusually silent. Theophilus had dismissed the temporary staff early, wanting no noises, no footsteps, no chance of her being unsettled. She found him seated by the fire, coat removed, sleeves rolled back just enough to show the strength in his forearms. He looked tired, not worn, but thoughtful, softened by the orange glow. When he looked up, her breath caught. He said her name gently, Juliana. Her heart fluttered helplessly. He motioned for her to sit if she wished, but she remained standing. The room felt too intimate, too warm, too filled with the quiet she had been holding inside her for months. The truth pressed against her ribs like a living thing. Theophilus said something. She didn't hear it. All she heard was the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat in her ears. She stepped closer. His brows lifted in mild question, but he didn't move away. Juliana swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "I only wish to thank you for everything. You have shown me more kindness than I deserve." He shook his head gently. "Kindness is not a measure of deserving, Juliana." The warmth in his tone unraveled something inside her. She drew one slow breath, then another. Her heart was pounding so loudly she feared he must hear it. Before she could think better of it, before she could stop herself, she took the small, trembling step that changed everything. She leaned in. Her chin lifted. Her eyes fluttered closed. Her lips brushed the barest breath from his. It was barely a kiss, barely even a touch, but it was her whole heart, unguarded and trembling. Theophilus did not pull away sharply. He did not startle. He simply lifted his hand, cupping her cheek with a touch so gentle it made tears sting her eyes. "Juliana," he whispered, quiet but firm. Her eyes opened. His face was close. So close she could see the flecks of darker blue in his irises, but his expression held no anger, only something steady, controlled. "No," he said softly. "Not like this." She froze, mortification sweeping through her. She stepped back quickly, her cheeks burning, her breath unsteady. I'm sorry, Your Grace. I do not apologize." His voice dropped lower, almost tender. "You are exhausted. The journey has taken more from you than you admit. You need rest, not confusion." Her stomach clenched with humiliation. Confusion. Rest. He saw her as fragile. A child. She forced out a nod and fled the room before her tears could betray her. She did not sleep. Not truly. Not after that. She tossed through the long night, replaying the moment again and again. Her foolishness, his gentle refusal, the ache in her chest that refused to quiet. By morning, she had convinced herself of one truth. He does not want me. Not like that. Not at all. She would hold her dignity. She would be grateful. She would carry herself with grace. But when she saw the carriage outside the estate that afternoon, all her careful composure shattered. A woman stepped out, not a girl, not someone young and unsure. A woman, elegant, confident, dressed in deep sapphire silk that shimmered beneath the pale French sun. Her hair was pinned with jewels. Her figure was soft, full, beautifully curved beneath her corseted gown. Juliana stood frozen in the window, watching Theophilus greet her. He bowed, kissed her hand, lightly, respectfully, and the woman laughed, her hand resting on his arm with familiarity. Juliana's stomach twisted painfully. Of course, this is the kind of woman he would want. A woman with presence, substance, beauty. A woman with the sort of curves that would make any man look twice. Not someone like her. Not the thin, recovering girl who had embarrassed herself last night. She tore herself away from the window, retreating into her room and closing the door with trembling hands. She tried to read. She tried to sew. She tried to breathe, but every moment the same thought returned. He left with her. Hours passed. Long, aching hours. Evening settled over the estate, casting long shadows in the hallway. Her room felt too still, too small. She could not bear another moment trapped with her thoughts. Barefoot, wrapped in her shawl, she slipped silently down the hall. Light glowed under the study door. Juliana hesitated, her heart thudding painfully. She shouldn't disturb him. She shouldn't seek him out. She shouldn't care, but she did. She knocked lightly. He answered immediately. "Enter." The door opened. There he was, coat hung aside, waistcoat unfastened, hair slightly tousled as though he had run a hand through it a dozen times. He looked tired and impossibly handsome. He stared at her with mild surprise. "You're awake." "I couldn't sleep," she murmured, stepping inside. He gestured toward the chair. "Is something troubling you?" Everything. Absolutely everything. But she only shrugged, forcing her voice to remain light. I noticed you were gone today. He watched her carefully. I had business. With your guest? She asked, trying and failing to sound casual. A brief pause. Yes. Her heart twisted. She seems lovely. Very elegant. And you are upset, he said gently. She stiffened instantly. I'm not upset. One brow lifted, just slightly. No, I'm simply making conversation, she insisted, though her voice betrayed her. Something softened in his expression. Something warm, amused. Juliana, he said quietly, are you jealous? She froze, her face burning. I am not jealous. That would be ridiculous. Would it? Yes, she said, her voice pitching higher. I don't concern myself with who you spend your days with. The woman who visited, he said slowly, is my godmother. Juliana blinked, stunned. You're... What? She has known me since I was a child, he continued, leaning back in his chair with a calm she found infuriating. She is 56. Juliana stared at him. He waited. Then he smiled. A small, warm, genuine smile that made her toes curl. Juliana, he said softly, you are jealous. She covered her face with her hands. I am not. I'm absolutely not. I simply thought, I only wondered. Oh, this is awful. He stood, crossing the space between them with quiet steps. When he reached her, he spoke in a voice she had never heard from him before. Low, warm, close. You tried to kiss me last night, he said gently. And today you are angry with a woman 3 times your age. Her heart thudded wildly. Please stop talking. Why? He murmured. Because I am making a fool of myself. You are not a fool. She lowered her hands slowly, her cheeks flaming. He looked at her with an expression she could not understand. Not yet. It wasn't desire. It wasn't amusement. It was something deeper. Something careful. Something warm. Juliana, he said softly, go get some rest. The day has been long for you. She hesitated. And tomorrow? His smile deepened just slightly. Tomorrow, he said, we will speak again. The sun slipped beneath the Paris rooftops in a slow wash of gold, leaving the estate wrapped in a violet hush. Juliana watched the light fade from her bedroom window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The day had passed without a glimpse of him. Not a footstep, not a shadow, not even the distant echo of his voice. Mrs. Harrow, the elderly French maid, had said it casually that morning. His Grace left before dawn. Important business in the city. Business. The word had gnawed at her all day, not with jealousy. That storm had already spent itself, but with something far quieter, far more unsettling. Longing, a restless, quiet wanting she could not name. As night fell, the house grew still, the lamps dimmed, servants retired. But sleep would not come. Her thoughts moved in circles, his gentle dismissal last night, the strange warmth in his eyes when he said we will speak again, and the cold emptiness of an entire day without him. She rose from the bed. Just a walk, she told herself, just to clear my head. But she knew where her steps were taking her even before she reached the first staircase. The east hall was dark, save for a thin line of amber light shining beneath a single door. His study. Her heart lurched. He was home. She hesitated only a moment, then lifted her hand and knocked softly. There was no answer. But the door, left ajar, shifted slightly with the movement. She pushed it open. The room was dipped in warm shadow. The fire had burned low, red embers pulsing softly in the hearth. A single lamp glowed on his massive desk, casting the room in a honeyed amber. And there he stood. Theophilus was at the fireplace, one hand braced on the mantel, the other cradling a glass of brandy he had not touched. His coat hung over a chair. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his forearms. The soft lamplight caught the sharp line of his jaw, the tired pull around his eyes. He looked older tonight, and painfully human. He didn't turn when she entered. He only spoke, low and rough. Juliana. The sound of her name in that voice nearly undid her. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The quiet clicked into place like a lock. "You avoided me today," she said softly. Now he turned. The sight of her, standing in his doorway, face fragile with confusion and courage, struck him so deeply he had to inhale to steady himself. "Yes," he admitted. "I did." She swallowed. "Why?" He set the untouched brandy aside and faced her fully. "Because," he said slowly, "I did not trust myself to be near you after last night." Her breath stopped. Not the answer she expected. Not rejection, not disinterest, but a dangerous, quiet truth. She moved closer to the fire, wrapping her arms around herself. "Did I embarrass you?" she whispered. "No." He said it too quickly, too firmly. "Never." "Then why did you—" "Because I saw the child," he said suddenly, his voice cracking ever so slightly. "I saw the girl who pressed a lollipop into my hand 10 years ago, smiling at a stranger as though kindness were the most natural thing in the world." Her lips parted. "And when you leaned toward me, when your eyes closed, I felt as though I were about to take something that did not belong to me." She stared at him, stunned. He continued, shoulders tight with turmoil. "You are young, I am not. You are tired and frightened and grateful. I feared you kissed me because you thought you owed me something." His eyes softened painfully. "And I would rather cut off my own hand than take advantage of your gratitude." Juliana took a shaky step toward him. "But I am not a child," she whispered, "and gratitude is not why I—" Her voice broke. He crossed his arms, chest rising. "Juliana, I do not know how to reconcile what I see when I look at you." "Then look at me now," she said, lifting her chin. "Look at me properly. I am not the girl from the bakery." His gaze lifted to her face, slowly, reverently, and something inside him gave way. Silence fell, thick, breathless. Then she asked, very softly, "Why are you not married, Your Grace?" He closed his eyes a moment as though bracing for impact. When he opened them, the truth came out like something long buried. "Because I made a mistake," he said simply. "What mistake?" "I loved the wrong woman." Firelight flickered across his face as he told her how he once thought himself in love, how the woman turned to another man, how betrayal burned deeper than any battlefield wound, how he swore never to depend on a woman for happiness again, how he embraced solitude because it hurt less than hope. She listened, her heart breaking for him. And when he finished, she whispered, "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "No, I'm the one who is sorry." His voice dropped. "For avoiding you, for fearing you, for wanting you more than is wise." Her breath caught, their eyes held. Their shadows merged against the firelit floor. "Juliana," he murmured, "come sit with me." They sat on the leather settee beside the fireplace, the embers glowing like a secret. The world outside went quiet. For a moment, neither moved. The only sound was the soft, steady crackle of the embers. Then he asked, with that quiet intensity he used only for her, "Juliana, why did you want to kiss me?" Her throat closed. Her mind stumbled. I don't know," she blurted. Immediately she wanted to die. Fool, say something, anything. But Theophilus only stepped closer, voice low and steady. "Juliana," he murmured, "do you like me?" Her cheeks warmed. "Yes." "Do you trust me?" "Yes." His eyes softened in a way that made the room feel too small. "Could you ever love me enough to marry me?" Her breath trembled. "Yes," she whispered. He swallowed. Hard. Emotion flashed across his face, raw and unguarded. "Then tell me," he said quietly. "Why?" A long silence. A long, breaking inhale. Then she spoke. Not timidly, not foolishly, but with the trembling courage of a woman finally stepping into truth. Because you speak softly to the servants. His breath caught. Because you always pause before entering a room, as if you want to greet the world gently. His shoulders loosened, stunned. Because when I answer you, even if my voice is small, you listen. He blinked rapidly. He was not used to being seen. Because you stand by windows when you think, hands behind your back, watching the world like it might break. He glanced away. She had watched him more closely than he realized. Because you breathe differently when you're worried. He turned sharply toward her. My breath? He rasped. She nodded. Your jaw tightens, and your breath stops here. She lifted her hand to her own throat gently. Just for half a second. He had no words. Because you never look away from suffering. His eyes darkened. That line hit like a blow. You stay, she whispered, even when it hurts you. He exhaled shakily, chest rising. Because your silence is never cruel. A sound escaped him, soft, broken. He had feared his quietest parts the most. Because when you think no one is watching, you look lonely. He turned away sharply. A man hiding tears. And, she finished softly, stepping closer, because you don't know how good you are. But I see it. The room went completely still. Theophilus stared ahead at the fire, his jaw tight, throat working, breath unsteady. He had commanded armies. He had buried friends. He had stared down death without blinking. But this, being known, unmade him. Slowly, he turned toward her. Juliana. Her name broke in his mouth. He reached for her. Not with hunger, not with power, but with the reverence of a man touching something holy. His hand cupped her cheek. Her breath caught, their foreheads brushed. And then he kissed her. A slow, devastating kiss. A rediscovery. A surrender. A promise. When they finally parted, he touched her lips with his thumb, eyes burning. It feels as though I've been waiting 2,000 years for you. Her eyes fluttered closed, overwhelmed. He swallowed hard, trying and failing to steady himself. Go, he whispered, before I forget every vow I've ever made. She rose, trembling, breathless, and slipped out the door, her heart entirely undone. As the study door clicked shut, the final line curled softly through the ember-filled room. But love, once awakened, is never without consequence, and soon a shadow from Theophilus's past would step into their new world, wearing silk and a smile sharp enough to break a heart. Paris, winter 1812. Snow fell in soft, glittering sheets, dusting the carriages outside the Hôtel de Marigny. Lanterns glowed along the avenue, their golden light spilling over velvet gowns and polished boots. Inside, the ballroom hummed with warmth, perfume, and the soft tremor of violins tuning. Juliana had never stepped into a world like this. Her gown, a deep blue silk chosen by Theophilus himself, brushed her ankles like a whisper. It was simple, elegant, understated, yet she felt as if she were walking inside a dream. Her hair was pinned back loosely, 2 silver swallows tucked above her ear. Every detail had been selected with such care it made her heart ache. His care, his hands, his choices. The kiss from 2 nights ago still lived on her lips. She tried not to stare at him as they entered the ballroom, but it was impossible. Theophilus, St. Andrew, with his immaculate black coat and steady posture, looked carved from quiet strength. A man who had once chosen solitude, and was now, deliberately, choosing her. But then the air shifted. A woman approached, not the godmother, someone younger, someone beautiful, someone unmistakably polished, elegant, radiant, and familiar. Frederica, the woman he had once loved, the woman who had betrayed him. Juliana knew her instantly from the way Theophilus's shoulders stiffened. Not in anger, but in the kind of shock one feels when a ghost steps into the room. "Your Grace," Frederica said, her voice smooth as wine. "It has been an age." For one terrible second, Juliana's heart slipped. Frederica smiled politely at her. "And who is this lovely creature?" Theophilus answered immediately, firmly, "Miss Juliana Sinclair." He didn't say ward. He didn't say guest. He didn't say companion. He said her name. Just her name, as if that alone was identity enough. Juliana curtsied. Frederica's eyes held Juliana a fraction too long. Not cruel, not jealous, but measuring. It was enough to tighten the back of Juliana's throat. Theophilus extended his arm slightly toward Juliana. "Forgive us," he said, his voice polite but cool. "We were just about to take a turn around the room." Frederica smiled again, too softly, too knowingly. "Of course. Do enjoy your evening." As they walked away, Juliana forced her breath to steady. "She is very beautiful," she whispered. "She was," he said gently. "But beauty is not enough to build a life." His words warmed her. But the ache didn't vanish completely. Not because Frederica was a threat. She wasn't. Not because Theophilus wanted her. He didn't. But because Juliana had just witnessed the first piece of his heart break with her own eyes, and it hurt her for him. They found a quiet corner near the musicians. She turned to him softly. "You didn't tell me she would be here." "I didn't know," he said, "and even if I had, it changes nothing." Her eyes lifted. "Nothing." "Juliana," he said quietly, "I kissed you as a man kisses the woman he chooses. I do not give my heart easily, but what I gave you that night was real." Her breath caught. The ballroom dissolved. Only he remained. "I need you to understand this," he continued, his voice steady. "Seeing her again only reminds me of the vow I made, not to give myself where there is no truth, and what I feel for you is the first truth I have known in years." Emotion tightened her chest until she thought she might break. A violin began to play a soft, lilting waltz. Theophilus extended his hand. "Dance with me." She placed her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, protective. He pulled her into the center of the room and they moved together. Slow, careful, the world blurring into candlelight and music. It was not a dance of spectacle, but a dance of quiet understanding. No jealousy, no rivalry. Just two people deciding, without words, that they would not let ghosts ruin what was growing. As the waltz ended, he leaned close enough that his breath brushed her cheek. "Juliana," he whispered, "do not fear the past. I'm not looking backward anymore." Her eyes closed. Her heart steadied. And for the first time, she believed him. Paris, late winter, 1812. The morning after the ball arrived like a soft exhale. Pale sunlight filtering through sheer curtains, the distant bells of Saint-Sulpice drifting over the rooftops. For the first time in years, Juliana felt truly weightless. No scullery, no fear, no hiding. Only the memory of Theophilus's hand at her waist as they danced, the warmth of his breath against her temple, and the quiet vow he made, "I'm not looking backward anymore." She replayed it all while dressing, her cheeks warming each time she remembered the look in his eyes. Steady, certain, hers. For one blessed morning she allowed herself to forget the world. Theophilus was already downstairs in the study, leaning over correspondence with the usual solemn air. Except today, there was a softness around him, a calm that hadn't been there before. His fingers rested near the sealed ink pot, idle, as if he'd been staring at the same letter for several minutes without reading a word. He looked up when Juliana entered. Something in his gaze shifted. A small, private light, and she felt her breath catch. "Good morning," she said softly. "Juliana." The way he spoke her name felt like a touch. She stepped toward the desk, unsure whether to mention the ball or the dance or the way he had held her as if the world depended on it. But before she could speak, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Langley, the housekeeper of the Paris estate, entered with a neat pile of mail. "These arrived for you, Your Grace." She set the stack down. He thanked her, picked up the first envelope, opened it casually, and froze. Juliana saw the change immediately. The way his breath stopped, barely noticeable unless one had watched him as closely as she had. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer at first. He read the letter again, slower, colder. Then he handed it to her. Her heart stuttered as she unfolded the crisp parchment. "My dearest cousin Juliana, word travels quickly in London. Imagine my relief when I learned you are alive and residing, quite cosily, under the protection of a duke. I shall call upon you tomorrow. We have family matters to resolve. Your loving cousin, Percival Trelawny." Juliana's vision blurred. The paper trembled in her hands. Her stomach twisted into a knot so sharp she could hardly breathe. "He found me," she whispered. Theophilus stood. Not abruptly, but with a controlled, deadly calm that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "Juliana," he said, voice low, "look at me." She did. Her eyes were wide, frightened, uncertain. "You are safe," he said firmly. "He will not touch you. He will not take you. He will not even speak a word to you unless I permit it." "But he's coming here," she said. "Here, in Paris." "And I will deal with him here," Theophilus replied. No hesitation, no doubt, only steel. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "He sounds so calm, as if he owns me." "That is because cowards enjoy pretending they hold power." He stepped closer, taking the letter gently from her hands. "But he owns nothing, not your name, not your life, not your future." Emotion welled in her eyes. He saw it, and softened. Without touching her, he lowered his voice. "Juliana, last night we danced as two people with hope. Today does not take that from us." She swallowed hard. "But I brought this danger to your door." "You brought nothing," he said firmly. "He brought his greed. I brought you safety." A pause. "And I would bring it again, 1,000 times." Her breath caught. His eyes softened, but his stance remained strong. A soldier preparing to defend something precious. "We will face him together," he said quietly. "One day he will be a memory. And you," he exhaled, steady and sure, "you will live a life that fear never touches again." Her tears spilled, not because she was afraid, but because for the first time she believed she might truly be safe. That evening passed in uneasy quiet. Theophilus drafted letters, met with his solicitor, had documents drawn, made arrangements Juliana wasn't allowed to see. Protection, boundaries, strategy. He never raised his voice, never showed anger, but the air around him pulsed with purpose. When night came, he finally knocked at her door. "May I speak with you?" She nodded. He stepped inside, the lamplight casting warm gold across his face. He closed the door gently behind him. "I've prepared for tomorrow," he said. "You will not be alone with him. Not for a moment." She nodded. "Do you trust me?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because the question held so much weight. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." His shoulders relaxed, just slightly, as if that single word had steadied him. "Good," he murmured, "because tomorrow will test us both. But I promise you, Juliana, nothing he says or does will change the path we began together." Her breath trembled. The dance. His eyes softened. "Yes." She lowered her gaze, suddenly shy. "I didn't want it to end." "It didn't," he said. We only paused. It was not a romantic scene. It was not a kiss. It was something deeper. A quiet vow, spoken in the flickering light between a woman who had spent years running, and a man who had spent years guarding his broken heart. He left her door gently. No touch, no impropriety, but she felt his presence long after the latch clicked shut. As Juliana lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one truth filled her chest. Tomorrow, her past was coming to reclaim her, but this time she wasn't facing it alone. She had him, and that changed everything. Paris, late evening. A thin rain tapped against the tall windows of the Saint-Roch residence, the soft light of the lamps turning the sitting room into a warm, sheltered world. Juliana had fallen asleep curled on the chaise, a book still open on her lap, exhaustion softening her features. She did not hear the front door open. She did not hear the butler's confused greeting. She did not hear her name spoken in a voice that had once haunted her life. But Theophilus did. He was halfway down the staircase when he saw him, Percival Trelawny, standing in the middle of his Paris drawing room as though he belonged there. Rain darkened his coat. His expression was a poisonous mixture of triumph and false concern. Theophilus froze, one hand gripping the railing. His voice dropped into a quiet, lethal register. "How did you get into my house?" Percival smiled thinly. "Your staff believed me a relative. They were eager to be helpful." Theophilus descended the remaining steps with the steady, precise movements of a man who had survived battle. He did not look toward Juliana. He kept his eyes on the intruder. "Speak quickly," he said. "You have 10 seconds. Percival lifted a folded document. "I have come for what belongs to me." Behind him, Juliana stirred, her lashes fluttering as she woke. Her eyes adjusted to the dim room, and when she saw the man standing there, she went utterly still. Her breath hitched, her hands instinctively clutched the edge of the chaise. Her throat worked, but no sound escaped. A trembling silence. Percival turned at the movement, his smile widening. "Ah, there she is." Juliana's fingers tightened. Her whole body shook, not dramatically, not noisily, but the quiet tremor of a woman who has spent her life bracing for the worst. "Do not speak to her." Theophilus's voice was quiet, deadly. Percival raised a brow. "You hide her under your roof and expect me not to speak." "She is under my protection," Theophilus replied, stepping forward, "and you will choose your next words with care." Percival scoffed. "Protection? From what? Her own foolishness? Her lies?" He flicked a disdainful glance at Juliana, like she was a smudge he intended to wipe away. "You took a maid into your home, Your Grace. Surely you see how absurd this is. She is not a Sinclair. She is not a lady. She is nothing. She belongs with her family." Juliana's breath broke. Just a tiny sound. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, as though trying to swallow it. Theophilus moved instantly. He stepped between them, blocking Percival's view of her entirely. For the first time in Juliana's life, someone became a wall in front of her, not a threat behind her. "Percival," Theophilus said calmly, "you will not look at her. You will not address her. You will not say her name." Percival's eyes narrowed. "You speak as though you have a claim." Theophilus didn't flinch. "I have exactly the claim I choose." Juliana's trembling grew sharper. Her eyes glistened, not with tears of weakness, but with the unbearable flood of emotion she couldn't speak. She lifted one hand, barely, and touched the back of Theophilus's coat. Just the fabric. Just enough for him to feel that she was there, that she trusted him. Percival sneered. "She's bewitched you. Can't you see that? She'll use your pity to ruin you." Theophilus spoke softly, but the softness was more terrifying than a shout. "Be careful." "Or what?" Percival snapped. "Or," Theophilus said, stepping closer, "you will force me to forget I'm a civilized man." A long silence. Rain tapped gently at the windows. Juliana shook behind him, silent, terrified, clutching the back of his coat like a lifeline. Percival straightened. "You cannot keep her. I have legal rights. She is my cousin, and I will take her home tonight." "You will not take her anywhere," Theophilus replied. Not tonight, not ever again. Percival opened his mouth, but Theophilus raised one hand, stopping him with a single gesture. "Leave my house," he said. "Now, before I escort you to the street myself." Percival hesitated. He glanced once more toward Juliana, but Theophilus stepped again, blocking his view completely. A silent standoff. A decade of wounds meeting a decade of discipline. Finally, Percival lowered his voice. "This isn't over." "No," Theophilus agreed. "It isn't, but you are." Percival turned sharply and strode out, slamming the door behind him. The entire house seemed to exhale. Theophilus remained still for a moment, listening to the final echo of the outside door. Only then did he turn. Juliana stood there, trembling, her hand still half raised where she had touched his coat. Her eyes were wide, glassy, frightened. But when he stepped toward her, her body softened, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming relief of being protected for the first time in her life. Theophilus's voice gentled, the danger gone. "Juliana," he murmured, "you are safe. As long as I draw breath, you are safe." Her lip trembled. Her breath hitched again. This time not from fear, but from the impossible fullness in her heart. He reached for her hands. She let him. The rain fell softly outside. Part 9 ended with a promise more powerful than any proposal. She was no longer alone, and he would never let her be taken again. The storm passed in the night. By dawn, Paris had washed itself clean. The rain left the cobblestones shining like polished stone. The rooftops glimmered with pale morning light. Inside the Saint-Roch residence, the world was quiet. Too quiet for Theophilus to pretend he had slept at all. He stood near the tall window of the drawing room, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders tense, watching the first traces of light break over the Seine. He had not left Juliana's door all night, not because she asked him to, because she trembled in his arms after Percival left. And when she finally fell asleep, clutching the sleeve of his coat, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. Something in him, something he had denied for years, had broken open. He could no longer imagine a world where she was not under his protection, not because of pity, not because of duty, because he loved her. Quietly, completely, irrevocably. Footsteps approached softly. He turned. Juliana stood in the doorway, hair loose over her shoulders, still pale from the night before, wrapped in one of the soft shawls Mrs. Moreau had brought her. She looked fragile, yes, but not broken. There was a strength in her eyes now, born from being defended. Truly defended. For the first time. "Theophilus," she whispered. He inhaled slowly. Her voice always touched the part of him that knew how lonely he had been. "Come here," he murmured. She crossed the room softly, uncertain, her fingers tightening around the shawl. When she reached him, he lifted a hand, hesitated, and then brushed a loose curl from her cheek. Her eyes fluttered shut at the touch. Not from fear, from something new, something safe. "I frightened you last night," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't speak. I couldn't." "You did not need to speak," he replied gently. "I knew." Tears gathered at her lashes. "Will he come back?" "Yes," Theophilus answered honestly. "He will not give up easily." She swallowed hard. "Then what am I to do?" He lifted her chin lightly, making her meet his gaze. "Juliana," he said softly, "there is only one way he can take you. Only one." Her breath caught. "You must be unmarried," he continued, unclaimed in the eyes of the law. "Vulnerable." Her fingers trembled. "But I am." He shook his head slowly. "You do not have to be." She stared at him, unblinking as the meaning slipped through her like warm light. Theophilus's voice dropped to a low, steady vow. "Juliana, let me end this. Let me make you safe. Let me give you a life where no one can touch you. A life where you can breathe." Her knees nearly gave way. He stepped closer, so gently she barely felt it until his forehead rested against hers. "I love you," he said softly. "I was afraid to name it, afraid I had no right. But last night, when you reached for my coat," his voice shook, "I knew I could not live in a world where you are taken from me." A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb. "You do not need to answer quickly," he whispered. "I will not rush you. I will not claim you without your heart's full willingness. But Juliana," he breathed in, steadying himself, "if you will allow me, I would like to spend the rest of my life loving you." Her hands rose, trembling, and she touched his face, her fingertips barely grazing his jaw as though afraid he might disappear. "Why me?" she whispered. A tiny smile ghosted across his lips. "Because," he murmured, "you are the only person in this world who sees me. Because you loved me before you knew my name. Because I have waited for you for so long, I think my heart learned your shape before I did." She let out a sob, soft, disbelieving, overflowing. "Say it," he whispered. "If you feel it, say it." Her voice cracked open. "I love you," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I tried not to, but I do." His eyes closed, relief and devotion washing through him like breath after drowning. He cupped her face in both hands, leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he kissed her. A kiss without urgency, a kiss without fear, a kiss that felt like a promise being written onto the world. When they parted, her forehead rested against his chest, and his arms circled her gently, protectively, reverently. "So," he breathed, "will you let me protect you for the rest of my life?" She looked up at him, eyes shining, heart open, voice steady. "Yes." He exhaled shakily, pulling her close again, not with hunger, but with awe. "Then it is settled," he whispered against her hair. "We marry in Paris, today if you wish, tomorrow if you prefer, but no later." She let out a soft, breathless laugh, the first true laugh she had given in months. And for the first time in his life, Theophilus St. Andrew felt peace, not because the danger was gone, but because she had chosen him. Outside, the Paris bells began to ring, soft, hopeful, like a beginning, a new story unfolding, their story.
I kept my heart behind cold walls, a fortress built of stone. If love would ever search for me, it had to walk alone.
I held my breath through silent years, afraid of wanting more. I never soul could open every door.
2,000 years we waited, or so the aching feels. Time folded in upon itself, the moment we were real. If every breath was meant for love, take the ones we've stored. 2,000 years we waited, love, to open this locked door.
I hid my hope in shadowed rooms, too fragile to be seen. But something gentle woke in me the night you looked at me.
I didn't know these guarded hands could tremble at your touch.
I didn't know my weary soul could feel this much, this much.
2,000 years we waited, or so the aching feels. Time folded in upon itself, the moment we were real. If every breath was meant for love, then take the ones we've stored. 2,000 years we waited, love, to open this locked door. You didn't see the centuries
I carried in my chest.
You only saw a quiet man
Who never learned to rest.
You didn't see the nights I cried for something yet unknown.
But when your hand found mine at last, my heart felt newly grown.
This love feels old as mountain,
An echo through the bone.
a memory my soul recalled,
A place that felt like home.
So if we reach for each other now, it's not from sudden fire, it's from 1,000 silent nights that thawed into desire. 2,000 years we waited, or so the aching feels. Time folded in upon itself, the moment we were real. If every breath was meant for love, then take the ones we've stored. 2,000 years we waited, love, to open this locked door.
If heaven has a language, it speaks in quiet tears.
It whispers what you waited for was worth those silent years. So let the storms keep turning, love.
Let shadows rise and fall.
A heart that's waited lifetimes
Won't turn from you at all.
and when my voice grows softer, a twilight silver sigh,
Know this, I loved you long before I ever saw your eyes. 2,000 years we waited, a longing carved in steel. But every year was worth the wait, the moment you were real. If every breath was meant for love, then take the ones we've stored. 2,000 years we waited, love, but we'll wait alone.